Now, for the second half of the evening, I would like to introduce Donald Carrick, who's going to be talking about Genghis Khan. Now, big subject, big historical figure. So Donald is going to give 3 talks about Genghis Khan and his...
Not all tonight, don't worry.
So you will be able to find the details, but all the details are always on the website, and there's a meetup group. And the idea behind this is everybody is a ragged university. Each of you is a universe, a unique universe of knowledge, accredited by your life experience. And with the membership of one. So these are moments in history, and I always enjoy each and every event and individual. So without further blabbing from me, I will introduce you to Donald. Donald, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I am going to tell you a story. It's a true story. But before we do, please help yourself to my seat. I'm not using it. Before I do, a word on stories. What they are, what they're for. We like to think of history. We like to speak about history as if we're talking about facts. We're not. The past is a matter of fact. It happens at a fixed point in time. It's not changeable. But history isn't about facts. History is a delivery mechanism. It's a compression file that allows the human brain to retain information. The better the story, and the better the telling of that story, the easier it is for you to remember it. The easier it is for you to think about it later. The easier it is for you to contextualize it, recontextualize it, add your own stories on top. If I was just going to stand here for an hour and give you a series of dates, names, events, I'd lay good money at least one of you wouldn't be able to remember a single one of those by the time you left. This is the nature of history. We need to acknowledge this. We need to understand this, and we need to embrace this, because the fact that we gravitate towards stories, the fact that we gravitate towards narratives, is not a bug in the programming that needs to be fixed. It is a feature of the human mind and the way that it understands information. Every single one of you resides in the present, that point in time. Your conceptualization of what the present is informed by your understanding of the past. Your understanding of the past is facilitated only by history. So in other words, every single person in this room is living in a reality partly defined by how good the stories you are told were. I'm going to demonstrate my point with 2 words. It's a simple thought experiment anyone in this room can do. World War. Now you've heard 2 words and you're waiting for a 3rd one because you don't know which story I'm telling. World War I, World War II. Now neither one of these events is more real than the other. Both happened. If I'd lay good money, every single person in this room knows considerably more about one of these events than the other. Part of that reason might very well be that it simply fits better into a narrative. As terrible as those events were, it's just a better story. But enough of that. On to tonight's story. Like all good stories, it starts with a very simple question. Are you sitting comfortably? I'll take that as a yes. Story begins with a boy. Well, no, that's not true. It can't. We don't spring out of the ground fully formed. The story begins with a woman. How else could it? This woman's name is Hulun. The year is 1162, the place is Mongolia, or what we would call Mongolia now. It's not a nation at this point. Hulun is not a princess, she's not anyone of any importance. She was born into a different tribe than the one she currently inhabits. The reason for this is that, like far too many women in this period of history, she's been the victim of kidnapping. Hulun was kidnapped from her birth tribe, her birth clan, called the Merkid, by the man who now calls himself her husband, a man named Yesiga. Hulun, as his second wife and as a captured wife, women seen as property, as objects, as has unfortunately been the case through much of human history, holds a fairly low social status within the clan. And Hulun has, in 1162, just given birth to her first child. It's not her husband's first child, he has a boy by his first wife. The child that she has given birth to is also a boy. His name is Temujin. He has no family name. The Mongols do not. They have only one name. He has been named after a Tartar warrior that his father has recently defeated. It's a sign of respect to the dead warrior. Legend will say of Temujin that he came into the world holding on to blood. He was born in one hand clutching a blood clot. The reason I think there's some possible truth to this story is that did not have any particular symbolic significance at the time, or later when the story was being written down. Let's move forward a little bit. Temujin is not the only child of his mother and his father. His father, as previously stated, has children by his first wife, and Hulun has further children. Temujin, like all Mongol children, or almost all, is an illiterate, can neither read nor write. But the Mongols do not have a written language at this time. Any literate Mongol can read a language of a foreign nation, but they have no written language of their own. He is an animist, which is to say that he worships the sky, literally as a god. He worships sunlight. He worships the spirit of the mountains. Some Mongols have joined the foreign religions of Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, to a lesser extent Hinduism. But this animistic, shamanistic nature worship is still by and large the dominant religion, and it's the one that he follows. He lives in a society which is not only illiterate, it's extremely poor, even by the standards of its closest neighbors. The Mongols consider themselves to be the descendants of the Huns, as in Attila the. But their years of greatness are centuries past. Life for the various Mongol clans is not easy. They are nomadic people. They have no fixed homes, no fixed cities or towns. They hunt for their food. They forage, and they herd once wild, now tamed animals with them, which they from time to time slaughter. It's also a very violent life. The various Mongol clans have a distinct habit of attacking one another on essentially an assumed pretense. Some slight 2-3 generations before can be enough of an excuse for a raid. And a raid is just a good name for on-land piracy. You attack another clan, perhaps some people die, perhaps they don't. You steal horses, cattle, property, including women. History is a very misogynist place to live. For most of his early life, Temujin is remarked upon to be a very intelligent child, but not very remarkable one beyond that. His low social standing and the social standing of his mother mean there's no likelihood he's never going to be anything of any significance. He may someday, as part of his clan, go to something called a hurulta. This is just a meeting. A leader, known as a Khan, can call one of these. If you attend, you're showing your loyalty to him. Temujin might attend such a meeting as part of his tribe, become part of some small army, go on a raid, perhaps distinguish himself in some small battle to be forgotten a generation or two later. He's an intelligent child, but this time is not a very remarkable one. When he's about 12 years old, his father, yet again, arranges a marriage for him. Not to a girl in his own clan, but to a nearby clan with whom they're friendly. Her name is Bort. She's a year or two older than Temujin, and the arrangement, as is traditional, is made that Temujin will work for her family for a period of some years for free, in exchange for which he will be allowed to marry Bort with, to some degree, her consent. She's not being kidnapped. The arrangement is perfectly common and fairly socially significant, since Temujin, albeit the eldest son of his mother, is not the eldest son of his father, and his mother, as a kidnapped wife, has quite a low social standing. So this is a very good thing for Temujin. Again, everything is looking normal. This is when things start to change. Returning home, having traveled with his son, Temujin's father comes upon a band of Tartars, another group of steppe people. The story has it that he attempts to fool these Tartars to not realizing that he is a Mongol, but is unsuccessful, and he is poisoned. Poison does not act quickly. Temujin's father lies, when he finally makes it back to his clan, dying. No hope for him. But this is a slow death, and there is time for word to reach Temujin of his father's plight. Perfectly understanding of this, Bort and her family are happy to let Temujin go and return to his home clan to see his father in the last days of his life, which is exactly what he does. We don't know what words passed between the father and the son, now only venturing into the dawn of adulthood. We don't know how painful Temujin's father's death was. We don't know if Temujin was present at the moment. We do know that in addition to the enormous emotional strain this must place on any child, to see their parents suffer and die, especially at such a young age, this act tore Temujin's life apart. With his father dead, the clan saw no reason to keep the captured wife, Hulun, essentially walking property, or her children with them. They would be a burden. Temujin was the oldest of her immediate children, was only 12 years old, not useful. Certainly none of the others were. And so rather than take on this burden, they were abandoned completely by the clan that they had grown up in, and by the clan that Hulun, despite the kidnapping, had tried to make home. Temujin could not return to his fiancée, he could not return to that family, because now he, all his brothers and sisters, including the one child there older than him, his half-brother, along with all of them, he would have to live an even harsher life. Without the protection of a clan, for several years, the family was forced to scrape out as much of the living as they possibly could. To give you some idea of what that might entail, the Mongols as a people were excellent riders. They virtually lived on horseback, and they were excellent archers. But even by those standards, these children learned to shoot very well because dinner was whatever you could kill this morning. You could fish in the rivers, assuming, of course, that it's summer, because in the winter months, the rivers will literally freeze over. The Mongols being one of the few people who know how to ride a horse on a frozen river. It's a harsh life, but somehow they do manage to survive it. And it's not all hardship. If you think about it, if your main concerns are firewood, shelter that you already have with you, and the tent, and meat, if you're really good at hunting, you can probably take care of everything you need for that day by, let's call it 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This means you do have an awful lot of time for recreation. You have a lot of time for storytelling. It's an illiterate society, so oral storytelling, the passing down of history is very important. You also have a great amount of time for games, for sport. Archery competitions are, of course, somewhat inevitably popular. There's also a popular dice game, or similar to dice games, actually carved knuckle bones, that was very popular. There's an interesting figure who enters our story, who's another boy. He's not from the Tayuchud, the clan that has cast out Temujin and his family. He's from a different band, called the Jadaran. He's not poor like Temujin. His mother, wasn't kidnapped like Temujin's was. He's actually an aristocrat. His name is Jamukha, and he will be one of the most important figures in Temujin's life on many occasions. Despite their different social standing, when Jamukha's people were camped near where Temujin and his family were staying, the two boys became extremely close. They seem to have shared an equal intellect, both being regarded as smarter than most of their peers. They also, their later action would prove, seem to have had something of a disrespect for tradition in the face of pragmatism. The two boys became so close that they became brothers. I mean this literally. The term is often translated to blood brothers. There was a form of brotherhood which was voluntary. It was considered actually closer than the familial bond. And the two boys entered into this. This was not something taken lightly. Eventually, unfortunately, Jamukha, along with his people, left and did not take Temujin or his family with them, and they were again alone. I mentioned his half-brother Bekta earlier. Bekta is the oldest child there. She has a father with Temujin, but not a mother. As the oldest male, history is a misogynist place to live. The early teen Bekta is known to have exploited his position of power, to have taken joy in bossing the other children around, setting them to task. This was traditionally his right in his culture. It's also rather concerning to bear in mind that fairly soon, Bekta's age will mean that he has the right to, entirely without their consent, it's not considered necessary, marry Temujin's mother. I mention all this because of what happens next. We don't know whether it was motivated because of the threat of Bekta becoming his half-brother, stepfather, I'm not even sure what the term would be here, or whether it's simply because of Bekta lording it over the rest of the children. But Temujin and his younger brother, Kasa, decided that they wanted a change. And so, in complete violation of tradition and religion, one day, Temujin and Kasa murdered their brother Bekta. They shot him. Temujin shot him in the back, Kasa shot him through the chest. Bekta died almost instantly. This was a demonstration of something that will become increasingly prevalent in Temujin's life. Not only a complete disrespect for tradition, for the way things are done, but an acknowledgement of his own inferiority. He wasn't nearly as good a shot as Kasa. So he gave Qassar the more lethal position to ensure success. Now, I mentioned that the raiding of Mongol clans could be based on the slightest of pretense. And the Tayachud, who controlled the land where this murder had taken place, considered this perfectly innocent pretense. They attacked Temujin's family. They had absolutely no hope. And Temujin was enslaved by the Tayachud, separated from his family. It's uncertain exactly for how many years Temujin was a slave. What we do know is that for a decent amount of his time as the nomadic clan moved, he was not allowed the same freedom of movement that most people were. He was placed in something called a kang. Now, you probably don't know what that is, but the medieval Europeans had a very similar idea. It's a piece of wood that goes across the neck and secures the wrists like this. It's heavy. And we are talking about a clan which is walking and riding for hours every single day for years. Try to imagine what that would be like. He was not in this permanently. He was let out in order to perform manual labor. He wasn't let out to sleep. Again, the story could have ended here. It's how it ended for a lot of people in this situation. Not for Temujin. No. So there's another aspect of this character that's worth mentioning here. He had a capacity for creating very, very deep friendships, personal bonds. He was a very charismatic person. He also seems to be very empathetic, which might seem very strange from what we're going to hear about later on. And he had managed to befriend very closely one of the slave families who was given the essentially punishment exercise of looking after him. So one day, when he was guarded by only one man, as most of the men were away, I believe, hunting, Temujin took the heavy kang around his neck, lifted it swiftly, and struck his captor in the skull, knocking him to the ground, unconscious. He then fled. He wasn't an idiot. He didn't run far. In fact, he doubled back. As soon as he was out of sight, he doubled back, and he hid with the family he had managed to befriend. Had he actually run, there is no way he could have possibly escaped. We're talking about men on horseback here. There is no way you can do that. The family were persuaded to cut the kang from the champion's neck, and after another day or two of hiding, he managed to very stealthily make his way out of the camp. His family will return later in the story. After he escaped, we're not certain of his exact age, but he was probably about 16 years old. He managed to make his way back to his family, who had been living much the same existence they had been when he left them several years earlier. But he did not continue the life to which he had become accustomed. Rather, Temujin seems to have directed the family into another clan, led by a king called Khan. Through intelligence, charisma, and natural ability, Temujin rose very, very quickly in the estimations of this new clan. So much so that he was able to return to his fiancée and actually marry her. He impressed Khan so much that he was in a position to ask for an enormous favor. He asked to become his son. In much the same way that you could become someone's brother by choice, you could become someone's son by choice, with their consent. This was a very, very big thing to ask, and it tells us a great deal about what someone with the material means of a slave, how charismatic and how talented he must have been, that Khan agreed. In fact, not only did he make Temujin his son, but he offered him a position of extreme importance. He offered him the position of, essentially the translation comes to leader of the young men. Again, this is someone who was a slave maybe not a year before. This would have been a position of a warrior. It's a pretty noble position by the estimation of the society. And Temujin said no. He had absolutely no desire for that. Didn't want to be a soldier. Didn't want to be a great warrior. No, what he asked for was protection. He asked that his family be allowed to leave the clan. That they would go off and make their own way. But that they would fall under the protection of Khan. Khan agreed. Why wouldn't he? Temujin, along with 6 other quote-unquote men, I say quote-unquote because we're talking about late teenagers here, and history is a very misogynist place to live, an unknown number of women, including his wife and his mother, formed their own camp. And they returned to a peaceful life, but a considerably easier peaceful life. They had material means. They had social connections. This wasn't this scraping by that comes so familiar to them. Again, the story could have ended here. Except for what happens next. If you remember, Temujin's mother was from a clan called the Merkid. The Merkid considered her kidnapping to be a decent provocation. Anything could be. And so they decided to attack the camp, to attack Temujin and his family. In the attack, they kidnapped his wife. Now, of all the mistakes to make in history, this might be one of the worst. But we need to understand that people in history can see the story. And let's change perspective briefly. Imagine yourselves in the place of the Merkid. A very powerful clan, doing well for yourself, wealthy by the standards of albeit a very close civilization. And let's imagine that you're one of the night watchmen. You're drinking, you're telling stories, you're playing games, you're hunting. And your recent actions in kidnapping this woman and in attacking this small camp don't really prey on your mind, because why would they? A small camp with only 7 guys is no threat to you. You certainly can't expect retaliation. Which is why it would probably come as a rather horrible surprise when, as one of those night watchmen, you were to look to the mountains and see 2 entire armies coming towards you. On one army, we have Temujin, leading the army of Khan. The other, we have Khan, leading his army. Temujin did not attempt what might be referred to as a proportionate response. This was wholesale slaughter. Very, very uncommon. You steal from me, I steal from you. That was the way of things, not for him. You kidnap his wife, he burns your civilization to the ground. Temujin did manage to recover his wife in this raid. Though things were slightly complicated by the fact that she was pregnant. Such was the span of time, it's unclear whether or not the child was actually his, though he would consider it to be his until he died. This victory resulted, of course, in enormous material gain, because once you've slaughtered an entire people, their stuff was up for grabs, and gave Temujin even greater social standing. But he didn't return to his peaceful life, not now, no. He accepted the position that had once been offered to him, that of a military leader. And with, yes?
Sorry, I just wanted clarification because you said, so conquest
Yes.
wasn't a normal, it wasn't like the thing you do. So this was like completely like a new concept to go and like...
It has happened very occasionally in the past, but these are tribes, clans that have been attacking each other, stealing some goods, stealing some people, running away. It's hit and run tactics, it's raiding, it's theft. The idea of going after a clan, certainly one this big, and just destroying it was fairly unheard of, yes. Question answered?
Yeah, no, it was just the way that you just kind of like went over it really quickly, so I was just like, wait a minute, so this wasn't like a thing, because I had this time of the world that like, I played Civilization I think 40 times, and I imagine like everybody's doing this, but this is like a new phenomenon for this to happen.
For this particular culture, yes. I mean, not on a global scale, certainly. But yes, it's fairly unheard of. Where was I? Yes. Along with Jamaica and the other people he's met through the army of Ankara, the next couple of years go very well for him. He returns to a more traditional raiding style of warfare. Becomes very well for him. Unfortunately, he also starts to institute a bit of social change. This is a society which generally rank related to blood. If your father was important, you were important. If your mother was kidnapped, you weren't so important. Temujin began to organize the people following him in what was, for this society, a completely new way. He didn't organize them into family groups, he organized them into groups of 10. 10 leaders, each of whom had 10 people following him, and so on. Position of rank was not awarded by blood, it was awarded by merit. Merit was determined solely by the people above you. So Temujin determines the merit of 10 people. Those 10 people then determine the merit of 10 people below them, and so on, and so on, and so on. This may seem like a very obvious thing to us, but the difference in an army and a society which runs itself based on what you're good at as opposed to who you're related to really can't be overestimated. So successful are his social changes, so successful is he as a tactician, that he begins to rise as an uncomfortably fast rate for many of the people around him. Jamaica, his once best friend, comes into direct conflict with him. Ankara begins to worry that this young lunatic is going to try and take his throne. And many of the more aristocratically minded Mongols, even not in his immediate clan, are worried by the fact that this new meritocratic system is being so successful that it may take all of their power from them and all of their wealth. What happened next is not terribly surprising. Essentially a full-scale civil war. Temujin wasn't just leading one clan anymore, one army or one division. He managed to gather an increasing number of clans to him, largely just due to his success. Those clans, once reorganized into this new 10 by 10 meritocratic system, became infinitely more efficient, In turn, they became more successful. Their success attracted more clans to him, and so on and so on. As this was rapidly approaching a point of critical mass, an alliance against him inevitably formed Jamilcar at the head of it. Jamilcar, remember, was an aristocrat. The war was long, it took several years, and it was bloody. The Mongols fought on horseback, they fought with bows. They didn't actually tend to get into close-up personal fighting too often. So battles could take a very long time, with huge formations of horsemen riding around each other, firing arrows into one another. I won't go into the details of every single battle. I find this type of history, frankly, a little boring. But I will tell you one war story that I think is very instructive. During one battle, Temujin was shot through the neck, the marrow. Didn't go through his jugular, that would have killed him for certain. But wounds like this could easily become infected. And if the arrow had been poisoned, that risk was easily high. The Mongols, as was pointing out, are people phobic of blood, and with a great taboo against spilling blood directly on the ground. That may seem ludicrous, knowing what is to come, but it's the case. One of Temujin's lieutenants was so loyal to him and considered him so close a friend that he spent an entire night sucking the blood out of Temujin's neck and swallowing it. That in and of itself, as well as being kind of disgusting, was a huge taboo. When his stomach was so full that he could no longer drink the blood, he spat it on the ground. The level of religious and cultural taboos being crossed here is huge. And it's all done out of friendship. It's all done out of loyalty to this one guy. When Temujin regains consciousness, he asks for fermented yak's milk. This is the principal form of alcohol available to the Mongols at this time. They don't have any. This same lieutenant, who's already done so much, is aware that in Jamilcar's camp, they do have fermented yak's milk. It's the middle of the night. And so, in what we may consider a slightly comedic display, besides, the appropriate response to this is to get naked. The reason for this is that this is considered extremely shameful. A naked man seen walking through a camp is not something that other people are going to want to look at. It's not a matter of fear of the body so much as a shame taboo. You're compounding someone's shame by witnessing their humiliation. So he walks naked into the camp, steals the booze, and somehow makes it back. If nothing else, this guy had a really great story to tell for like years after this. Temujin receives the fermented yak milk, and of course, eventually he recovers. He revolutionizes the warfare over the course of this war that his people are fighting. He develops something which was called lightning warfare, a term which was thought to be appropriated by other people that we won't mention for now. This method is to ride a horse until it cannot be ridden anymore, to the point where you know another horse is waiting. Get on that horse and you repeat. This allows you to travel about 3 times as fast as if you're staying on the said horse. Very simple, but allowed his army to maneuver in a way that his enemy could not. Through a combination of tactical genius, his new meritocratic system, his ability to inspire the people around and below him, inevitably, Temujin was victorious in the war. Jamilcar managed to escape the final battle when it became clear that his side was going to lose. But after a few months living, ironically, the kind of extraordinarily harsh life that Temujin had been leading, when the two boys first met and been friends, Jamilcar was betrayed by some of his friends and handed them over to Temujin's army. Temujin, prizing loyalty above almost everything else, and being someone prone to acts of extreme violence, had everyone who betrayed Jamilcar to him executed on the spot. And then he and Jamilcar spoke several days. Now, there are various accounts of what was said here, but I don't think any of them can really be considered accurate. They're all too propagandistic. What we do know is that a deal was struck. Jamilcar asked to be executed in such a manner that his blood would not spill upon the earth. It was considered an aristocratic death. It was also considered to give his spirit immense power in the afterlife. In exchange for this kindness, Jamilcar promised to watch over Temujin and his reign and his issue from the afterlife and to entreat the other spirits in his power. Temujin agreed. One man who had once been his best friend was taken away and by his order killed. Having destroyed the armies that opposed him, having completely reshaped the very society, there was only one logical thing for him to do. Temujin called a Hurultan, that meeting I mentioned at the top. This was the first one that we know for where every single clan arrived. Every single member of the Mongol people swearing allegiance to one man. There were myths of this happening. This is the one time in history. We know for a fact this. He was, of course, not being called Temujin anymore. He was being called Temujin Khan. Khan means king, means leader. But that wasn't going to be his name for terribly long. And he wasn't finished. Temujin Khan, now leader of the entire Mongol people, renamed them the Great Mongol Nation. He made them one people, not a group of separate clans, and he reorganized an entire nation. We are talking about millions of people into this new meritocratic system. He also started passing laws. It's interesting to note what two of those first laws were. Outlawing the kidnapping of women and outlawing the practice of taking slaves in the manner he had. It's also worth noting that family that freed him, remember that, were released from their slavery and granted what by their standards was a fairly immense amount of wealth. So thank you from the man that once saved. There's a lot more to this story. This is really just the beginning of one of the lives that would shape human history more than any other, and that doesn't necessarily mean for the better. But it's life that by this point in our story has become set on a path, not just to change one society, but to literally reshape the world itself into what, by his estimation, was a better image. There are 2 more talks in this series. I hope you've enjoyed this first one. I hope to see you in the others. There's one last piece of the story before I let you all go and take your questions. I mentioned his name had changed to Temujin Khan, King Temujin. Well, it changed once more. There was a word in Mongolian that means fierce, forthright. It's also very close to the Mongolian word for wolf. His new name was Genghis Khan. That's it. Are there any questions? There's a pub down there, and it's really late at night. But does anyone? Okay, we've got. I'll get to you in a second. But yes.
Where are the next calls?
That is an amazing boost for my ego. Thank you. Alex has the actual dates posted on the website. I couldn't tell them off by heart. They're every 2 months. So the next one is in August. The third one is in October. They're get the same style. Kind of, as I said at the beginning, I believe in the idea of dramatic storytelling. So one of the best ways to define history. So the second talk is called Singing the Law and Riding the City. It's about the rule of Genghis Khan. And then the third talk is called Memories of Blood, which is about his death, what happened to the empire afterwards, and then essentially a reflection on why this way of thinking about history is very important, but it's also completely redundant now. So I hope to see you there. And as I say, Alex will have the days posted. And question?
Yes. So kind of along the lines of what I was butting in and asking you earlier, I'm just curious how this is like located in history among the other cultures, because kind of some of these policies that this new Genghis Khan is promoting seems like more liberal than the American Tea Party. So I'm just wondering, where is it located? Is he? I mean, he's not. You're making him sound like almost a political philosopher, and this is very fascinating because I'm not interested in the side of the story, which is why I'm so interested in it. So can you kind of explain like how is this like really new, or is he did he like go wander around the desert for 40 days and like talk to some tree and sort this out?
Okay, I'll try and encompass all of that question. He didn't wander around the desert, but he did talk to a mountain.
Okay.
Or rather, the spirit of the mountain. There was a particular mountain that was considered extremely important. They worship spirits in the land and in the sky. Since a mountain is very close to the sky, these spirits were seen as extremely powerful. The highest mountain in Mongolia was considered basically to be a god. He did spend a considerable amount of time praying to it. In terms of where this sits relative to sort of the cultures that are around him, it's very unusual. The Mongols are actually a surprisingly isolated people. They have contact with, for instance, the Tatars, but the Tatars are a very monarchic people. They certainly don't have anything like democracy. They're more organized, they're more centralized than the Mongolians, but they certainly don't have these sort of meritocratic ideas. Some meritocratic thought is going on in China at this time, but it's more meritocracy amongst the aristocracy. If you're born a serf in China, you're never going to be emperor. So in terms of what he would have been exposed to, it's very new. We don't know how influenced he was by this, but we do know that both Christian and Islamic thought were beginning to influence the Mongolians at this time. So it's possible that some of those scriptures may have influenced them. But since we know for a fact that he remained an animist and a shamanist until his death, these certainly were principal influences on his life. So it seems like a lot of what he was doing, it wasn't based on someone else's philosophy. This was something he created based on his experiences and his own personal drives. One thing as well, just to address, he said that these sound like very liberal ideas. They are, but it's also worth remembering they're very effective. It's a double-edged sword between the liberalism of meritocracy and just the straight-up efficiency of my army is better organized than yours. So he may have been liberal, he may have been just a pragmatist. Does that answer?
Yes.
Alright, cool. You turn the blue and then we'll get you. And then you'll be third, sir. I promise. So, yes, Mr. Blue.
You were saying that the Mongol were illiterate and didn't have a written language. So what are the sources for a lot of this information?
Very good question. If you come to the second talk, there's more of an answer to that. I'll be honest with you. They're illiterate at this point, but I'll spoil a little bit of the second talk for you. They're not illiterate by the time he dies. Temujin actually invented a language. Well, he commissioned a language. He didn't do it personally. So then the writing of Mongolian history really begins at that point. Also, you have to remember, it's an oral history society. So his very early life, we know very little about. How long he was a slave, it was a fact that he actively suppressed because it was seen as shameful. And it was then later suppressed after his death by the descendants of the people who enslaved him, because it would have been a death sentence. So there's definite areas here where we're having to make guesses. But certainly by the time you get to the battles, by the time you get to the political stuff, enough of this is remembered. And in an illiterate society, people get very, very good at remembering and re-articulating. So a lot of this is oral storytelling that is then recorded down in the new written language when it's eventually developed. You were next, sir?
Yeah, maybe I'm talking about what says that all population.
Obviously, an actual census is not available. Well, let's do some scales. Clan, we're maybe talking 100, 200 people for a small one, tens of thousands for a really powerful one. His small groups, like when it was him and his family, that's maybe 10, 20 people. The overall Mongol nation, when it finally forms, we're talking a couple of million. But I think I'm really wanting to stress it, it's not a couple of million who live in centralized blocks. There's a couple of million people who live in groups of 10, 100, maybe 10,000 at most, who all come together to form this one solid cohesive whole, a couple of million people at this point. And then with what happens later, which is the forging of the single largest land empire in human history, obviously the population goes up a bit at that point. And you saw that.
It was already mainly answered over there, the first question there, but one part of the question was, are the dates reliable if they were related orally down through the centuries? How are they placed in context with our data system?
Again, very good question. The Mongols don't, at this point in time, use a 12-month calendar, they use a lunar 13-month calendar. So when we get the written language mentioned previously, the dates start to get recorded quite accurately. You can then infer the dates going back. So we know Temujin's age at a particular point, and we know that date. We can then backtrack to his birth. We know how many months, years by the Mongol calendar a certain battle happened ago. So once the dates start being recorded in written history, it's just a matter of backtracking. But as with the first question, there's definite vagueness here. We are certainly around some of the days. We don't know his precise age at certain events. We don't know how long certain periods happen. We know years. We don't know if that means 2. We don't know if that means 10 in some cases. That's it. Yeah, it's as accurate as we can make it. The year 1162 for his birth is probably accurate because he knew his age by the moon. And we have a recorded date of him saying what age he is so we can backtrack it. He might have been off, but probably not by very much, maybe 6 months either way.
That's good.
Yeah, pretty good. Yes?
While Genghis was out conquering the world, somebody administered his empire. And I believe there were the women in his family that administered the empire that he had. Will you be covering any of that in the next talks that you have?
Absolutely, yes. The next talk, which is about his rule, does feature that. it's important to remember that as much as it's, I think, a tendency in modern thought, I don't want to call it wishful thinking, but we like to imagine the past sometimes as being a bit more progressive than it realistically was. It's true, absolutely what you said, that women did play a key role in the administration of the empire. But they were never in a position where there was going to be a female Khan. It's still a misogynist society, it's still a patriarchal society. And Temujin outlawing the kidnapping of women doesn't equate to universal suffrage. But yes, absolutely, the role of women was very, very interesting in the way that the empire was run. So yeah, that will be getting covered in more detail in the second talk. Alex himself.
Could you give us a sense of the geography here? You mentioned, of course, that
Mongolia is really big.
yes, yes.
But yes, absolutely. We're talking about very large, flat areas interrupted by vast mountain ranges. There are forests, but it's pockets of forests as opposed to single, massive kind of areas for the most part. I don't know my Mongolian geography that well, so I don't want to go on about this too much, to be honest, because I'm going to end up saying something that's not true and embarrassing myself. But yeah, that's as much of an answer as I'm really prepared to give to that with my lack of expertise on the geography, to be honest with you. Is there anyone else, or shall we all head to the food and the pub?
How did you get so interested in things?
Sorry?
How did you get so interested in research?
You know, I think you're about the sixth person to ask me that tonight. And every time I wish I had a better answer. The truth is that that is a part of the incarnation of this guy. I hope not. But that said, if anyone wants to form a horde after the talk, the imagery is right for the taking. That's all I'm saying. But no, to give you a serious answer, I'm extremely lucky. As a child, I was very interested in history, but had a lot of that interest beaten out of me by the, frankly, really dull history that I was taught at school, until I was lucky enough to have a man named Frank Hotchkiss, who taught me in my final year of high school, and who managed to reignite in me a passion for history, and a love of history, and a love of the story of history, and the fact that it is a story, and that's something I can do. And he didn't teach me about Genghis Khan, but he taught me to love history. And honestly, since that time, I've developed maybe 6 or 7 historical obsessions, of which Genghis Khan is one. I chose him as the topic for these 3 talks because I think it's a bit of history that honestly is probably far less well known than it needs to be. You know, we're talking about a very important guy. Whether we want to say he was a good guy, I'm certainly not willing to go there myself. We're talking about someone who killed so many people, the forests grew back, which did make him pretty good for the environment, I have to say so. Yeah, it's terrible things, obviously, but because it's a really important piece of history that very few people know, and because it does just make for such a good story, and as such a good demonstration of what I'm trying to convey here, that history is about storytelling, that's how you retain information, that's how we should be passing information on to each other. You know, we shouldn't be just imparting facts, dates. These things are important. These things have to be a part of the story. But if you really want to teach people about history, what you need to do is tell them a really, really good story. And honestly, the life of Genghis Khan just lends itself to that extremely well.
And your anecdote about the blood, that would have been told orally and then written down.
Yes, yes. Well, the lieutenant in question, who I wish I could remember his name, but it is recorded, was given a great deal of honours for having done that. So he was essentially promoted, he was given quite high standing. So there's a lot of evidence behind it. Whether it was exaggerated, we don't know. The blood thing is probably true. The walking naked into the enemy camp and getting the fermented yak's milk might be true, might be that guy really exaggerating, you know. Perhaps at a certain point, how are we going to know? But it's a good story.
I've had nights like that.
Haven't we all?
Yeah. Right.
All right. Am I right in saying that's everyone? I really don't want to miss anyone if there's another question, but I think. All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. Right.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks everybody for coming, and once again for making my evening so enjoyable. There's lots of food through there, and just to give you a sense of what's coming up, on Saturday at the Central Library, we're going to be running an IT session where do you want to know about social media, making your own website, securing your own computer, etc. Come along, it's free. IT and biscuits. On Sunday, there's a film, fooding at Serenity Cafe. There's going to be a freshly cooked curry on the night. It's vegetarian, it's vegan, everybody's welcome. We watch, we have a bite to eat, have a chat, put our feet up. You don't have to watch the film. Everybody can come and go as they please at all the events. And on Monday, we have Carrick, who's going to be talking about development with dignity down at the Leaf Beer Company. And some incredibly powerful work that he's been doing over in Pakistan. And next month, here in the County House, we have Mr. Raymond, Professor Raymond, wow, who's going to be talking about the psychology of control. Don't get and Warwick Hall, who's going to be talking about the first ever girl band. This is, again, this is going way back into the depths of history. And he's going to be talking about the mysterious myriad mosaic. He's an archaeologist. And, but anyway, thank you very much for coming. And please remember to look up Food Sharing Cooperative and Corner Matin and Corner Loaf of Bread is delicious bread. And what was the shop again?
Pantry Bakery.
Where is it?
It's opposite King's Theatre.
Pantry Bakery.
It's very close. It's in Home Street, very close to
Well, they've got my patronage already because, yeah. And please help take away, let's not make let everything go to waste. Everything's on the website. Anybody's welcome to write and share on the website. Yeah. With that, yeah, nice seeing you all.